Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 767, and today is March 7th, 2025. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. I have another absolutely massive jam-packed show for everyone today. So I'm going to get right into it. Just want to give people a couple reminders. One, it's the Libertarian Institute Fund Drive time. So if you want to keep this show going, make sure I could do all the writing that I do and all the other work for the libertarian movement that I put in. Go ahead and head on over to the Institute and make a contribution. Right now we have quite a bit of matching funds, and so your donation will be doubled. And of course, we offer great kickbacks for anybody who donates to our organization. Additionally, you can find this show at the Institute and also on the blog at antiwar.com. YouTube, Rumble, or Odysee for the video version of the show. It's up anywhere you can listen to audio podcasts, and you can follow me on Twitter at @KyleAnzalone_. Let's get into it. First up on today's show, this article that I wrote for the Institute on March 5th. Trump admin moves to abolish another international aid agency. So during the opening days of the second Donald Trump administration, the White House has worked to rein in and scale down government agencies that distribute foreign aid. The Inter-American Foundation, the IAF, is next on the chopping block. On Friday, Trump appointed Peter Marocco as the head of the IAF, fired the agency's president and CEO, Sarah Avail, and removed its board of directors. Morocco is now the sole board member and chairman, according to employees speaking with The Guardian. Members of the IAF attempted to push back on Trump's move. Eddie Arolia, one of the board members removed by Trump, sent a letter to the White House that said, "We do not consider the assignment of Peter Marocco to the role of board chairman sent via email to the IAF Chief Operating Office on February 28, 2025, to be a valid appointment as required by IAF's enabling statute." He added that the power structure of the IAF was to remain unaltered. Arola's instructed Avail to deny access to IAF systems and files to anyone outside the organization. He was likely referring to the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. His appeal was unsuccessful as Morocco and DOGE gained access to the agency on Monday. Additionally, the agency's 37 employees were placed on paid leave. On Tuesday, the DOGE X account reported that the agency has been reduced to one employee. And then a post on X said, the IAF, an agency whose primary action was to issue foreign grants with a $60 billion budget, has been reduced to its statutory minimum of one active employee. DOGE went on to identify several IAF programs that were cut: 903,000 for alpaca farming in Peru, 364,000 to reduce social discrimination recyclers in Bolivia, 813,000 for vegetable gardens in El Salvador, 323,000 to promote cultural understanding of Venezuelan migrants in Brazil, 731,000 to improve marketability of mushrooms and peas in Guatemala, 677,000 to expand fruit and jam sales in Honduras, 483,000 to improve aerosol production in Ecuador, and 39,000 for beekeeping in Brazil. The IAF was not the first U.S. aid agency to be axed by Trump. USAID has largely been dissolved, with its remaining functions moved under the control of the State Department. Additionally, the National Endowment for Democracy, or the NED, a U.S.-funded organization, lost its financial backing from Washington, forcing it to halt its partner support. USAID and the NED are infamous for funding non-governmental organizations overseas to help Washington complete regime change operations, as the latter agency did in Ukraine in 2004 and 2014. Morocco was involved in the dismantling of USAID and serves as Trump's Director of Foreign Assistance at the State Department. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court ruled that Trump must restore $2 billion in funds that were to be distributed by USAID. It is unclear what ruling, if any, what impact, if any, the ruling will have on Trump's attempt to close IAF. Now, speaking of USAID, I wrote this up for the Institute on Friday, or on the 5th as well. SCOTUS orders Trump to distribute $2 billion in foreign aid. So in a narrow 5-4 ruling, the Supreme Court ordered that President Donald Trump must allow USAID to distribute $2 billion in foreign aid that is currently frozen. In the opening weeks of the Trump administration, the White House has worked to cut down on foreign aid projects and to fund the vast network of NGOs operating with American financial support around the globe. So Chief Justice John Roberts and Trump appointee Amy Coney Barrett joined the three liberal justices, Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, in their ruling against the White House. The 5 justices upheld a decision by a district court judge that required the Trump administration to release $2 billion in foreign aid that the president ordered frozen. In one of Trump's first acts after returning to the Oval Office, he ordered a freeze on all foreign aid. Last month, a federal district judge, Amir Ali, issued a temporary order to the White House preventing the suspending, pausing, or otherwise preventing of foreign assistance funds. When the administration did not comply, the judge issued a second order, and the White House appealed to the Supreme Court. While the ruling against the White House ordered the enforcement of Judge Ali's decision, legal analysts explained the Trump administration can further litigate the issue. CNN Supreme Court analyst Steve Vladeck explained that the unsigned order does not actually require the Trump administration to immediately make up the $2 billion in foreign aid payment. It merely clears the way for the district court to compel those payments, presumably if it is more specific about the contracts that have to be honored. So in the dissent authored by Justice Samuel Alito, he blasted the majority for rewarding an act of judicial hubris by Judge Ali. Alito said he was stunned by the ruling, arguing that Judge Ali lacked the authority to order the White House to distribute the aid. He explained, "Does a single district court judge who likely lacks jurisdiction have the unchecked power to compel the government of the United States to pay out, and probably those forever, $2 billion taxpayer dollars?" The answer to this question should be an emphatic no, but a majority of this court apparently thinks otherwise. The White House is attempting to eliminate 90% of USAID programs and remove the remaining activities under the control of the State Department. Washington has long used USAID as a covert method to support regime change operations across the globe. So next up, this is one I wrote for the Institute on March 6th. Trump, everybody should get rid of their nuclear weapons. So President Donald Trump restated his desire to abolish nuclear weapons during a White House presser on Thursday. He said, "It would be great if everybody would get rid of their nuclear weapons. I know Russia and us have by far the most. China will have an equal amount within 4 to 5 years. It would be great if we could all denuclearize because the power of nuclear weapons is crazy." Currently, 9 countries, the US, UK, France, Russia, China, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel, possess nuclear weapons. With global tensions on the rise, several nations, including the US, are adding to their strategic capabilities. According to the Defense Intelligence Agency, Beijing is working to ramp up its production of nuclear weapons, although not to the level described by Trump. Last year, the agency predicted that China could have over 1,000 nuclear weapons. However, that would still give Beijing a far smaller arsenal than Washington and Moscow, which each have around 1,500 deployed nuclear weapons and thousands more in storage. Shortly after returning to the White House in January, Trump said he spoke with Vladimir Putin about denuclearization during his first term and that the Russian leader was receptive to the idea. Trump said, "We were talking about denuclearization of our 2 countries, and China would have to come along. China right now has a much smaller nuclear armament than us, or field than us, but they are going to be catching up at some point. I will tell you that President Putin really liked the idea of cutting back on nuclear, and I think the rest of the world, we could have gotten them to follow, and China would have come along too. China also liked it. Tremendous amounts of money are being spent on nuclear, and the destructive capability is something that we don't even want to talk about. It's too depressing. Trump has also discussed negotiating a deal with Moscow and Beijing that would see all three countries drastically reduce military spending. However, while Trump has at times voiced support for denuclearization and demilitarization during his first term in office, he scrapped two major arms control agreements with Russia, the Open Skies and the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaties. Additionally, Trump refused to engage in bilateral discussions with Russia on extending the last nuclear arms control agreement between the two world's largest nuclear arsenals, the New START Treaty. He insisted that Moscow must pressure Beijing to make it a trilateral deal, a demand that almost led to the downfall of the landmark agreement. Though President Joe Biden was able to reach an agreement with Putin to extend the treaty for 5 more years in 2021, it is set to expire next year without another extension. And if Trump's idea is that he's going to get a deal where Russia, China, and the U.S. all agree to denuclearize, I think that's a real mistake that could actually lead to the downfall of the INF New START Treaty rather than actually, creating more nuclear arms control, which is what Trump was suggesting in that statement. All right, next up here, another one I wrote for the Institute on March 6th. Pentagon awards contract for AI war planning tool. So the U.S. Department of Defense has awarded a contract to scale AI to integrate artificial intelligence into military operational and theater level planning. According to the Defense Innovation Unit, or the DIU, the AI system dubbed ThunderForge will accelerate decision making, allowing planners to more rapidly synthesize vast amounts of information, generate multiple courses of action, and conduct AI-powered wargaming to anticipate and respond to evolving threats. The AI will initially be deployed to the Indo-Pacific Command and European Command theaters. The DIU did not disclose how much Scale AI will be paid to develop ThunderForge, but added the system would also make use of Anduril's Lattice program and the state-of-the-art LLMs, large language models enabled by Microsoft. As the Pentagon continues to turn to the tech sector for weapons and other warfighting programs, the industry has increasingly sought to work with the Department of Defense. William D. Hartung, a senior research fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, explained last year how tech firms are replicating strategies of arm manufacturing giants, with many countries seeking Pentagon contracts, placing retired high-ranking military personnel in top positions at their companies. Anduril was founded by tech entrepreneur Palmer Luckey, specifically to seek contracts from the Pentagon. Google recently reversed a pledge not to build AI for weapons or surveillance. So the DIU press release said that the new AI marks a decisive shift in how the Pentagon plans to fight wars. This is a quote: ThunderForge marks a decisive shift towards AI-powered, data-driven warfare, ensuring that U.S. forces can anticipate and respond to threats with the speed and precision. Following its initial deployment, ThunderForge will be scaled across all combat commands. So according to the Washington Post, Dan Thedros, the head of the federal delivery at Scale AI, who previously served with the Marines and researched AI military applications for the Navy, claimed ThunderForge was needed because planning and operational process for the U.S. military has not evolved since Napoleon. So while the Pentagon views AI as an important tool for fighting future wars, its effectiveness is unclear. The Department of Defense has deployed Project Maven to the Middle East and Ukraine to aid with targeting. However, humans still do a much better job than the AI. Bloomberg's Katrina Mason elaborated on Maven's shortcomings, noting that the autonomous weapons systems aren't perfect yet. While humans at the 18th Airborne Corps can correctly identify a tank 84% of the time, Maven gets it right closer to 60%, and that number goes down to 30% on a snowy day. An additional issue with AI is that it could create a bias among its human operators to accept whatever recommendation it produces. Chief Warrant Officer 4 Joey Temple explained that Maven is increasing the number of targets a soldier can approve. He estimates the number of targets could be boosted from 30 to 80 per hour. According to Bloomberg, Temple described the process of concurring with the algorithm's conclusion in rapid stratico, accept. A second officer agreed, stating the benefit you get from the algorithms is speed. Speeding up the process may not lead to better results. Israel's military relied on a number of AI systems in planning and conducting operations, such as its Lavender program, which generates lists of names of suspected members of Hamas. As an Israeli soldier explained, he only spends 20 seconds on each name produced by Lavender before deciding to place it on a kill list. And of course, we know that Israel has probably killed more Palestinian children in Gaza than they have Hamas members, so it's obviously not a very accurate or system. And of course, a lot of times I think it's just meant to produce lists of names so Israel can have an excuse for bombing rather than actually trying to identify members of Hamas. All right, moving on to some news on the war in Ukraine here. This first one is from Dave DeCamp. Trump suspends military intelligence sharing with Ukrainian military. So the Trump administration has paused intelligence sharing with Ukraine on top of the suspension of military aid as a part of an effort to get Ukrainian President Zelensky to pursue peace talks with Russia. The intelligence pause has had an immediate effect on Ukraine's war effort since it has relied on U.S. intelligence for tracking Russian troops, and is required for firing U.S.-provided HIMARS rocket systems. As U.S. officials told Axios that the pause on intelligence sharing was focused on information that Ukraine could use to launch attacks inside of Russian territory, operations that have risked provoking a direct clash between the U.S. and Russia. The White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz suggested that the pause on both intelligence sharing and military aid could be lifted once peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are set. I think that if we can nail down these negotiations and move towards these negotiations and in fact put some confidence building measures on the table, then the president will take a hard look at lifting the pause. We have to know that both sides are sincerely negotiating towards a partial, then permanent peace. So on Tuesday, Ukrainian President Zelensky said the Oval Office argument he had with Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance was regrettable and insisted he was ready to work towards peace. Zelensky also said he was ready to sign an economic deal with the U.S. that would give the U.S. access to revenues from Ukraine's rare earth minerals and other natural resources. The Axios report said that the pause on intelligence sharing was the key issue that motivated Zelensky to put out the statement, but so far, Zelensky's comments haven't been enough for the U.S. to resume weapons shipments and intelligence support. CIA Director John Ratcliffe suggested that the U.S. could soon resume supporting the war. He said the pause will go away and we will work with the Ukrainians to shoulder to shoulder as we have to push back on the aggression that there is, but to put the world at a better place for this peace negotiations to move forward. So it is having another impact outside the HIMARS, and that's on the Storm Shadows. British Storm Shadow missiles useless for Ukraine following U.S. intelligence pause. So Ukraine's British-provided Storm Shadow missiles are now likely useless now that the U.S. has paused intelligence sharing with the Ukrainian military, the Daily Mail reported on Thursday. The report said that the UK is among several countries that have received orders from the U.S. prohibiting the sharing of U.S.-generated intelligence with Ukraine. The Storm Shadow missiles would have a range of about 155 miles rely on U.S. satellite data to be fired. Last year, Ukraine began firing Storm Shadow missiles, and U.S. provided ATACMS missiles into Ukraine, marking a significant escalation in the proxy war that risked provoking a direct clash between the U.S. and Russia. So, besides the satellite data, the U.S. has other intelligence capabilities inside Ukraine. Since the CIA has been deeply embedded in the country, a presence it began significantly building up following the 2014 U.S.-backed coup that ousted former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. U.S. officials have said that the pause on U.S. military and intelligence sharing will be lifted once Ukraine shows its readiness to engage with Russia. So we will see if and when this is reversed. And Ukrainian ambassador to UK says U.S. is destroying the world order. So Valery Zaluzhny, Ukraine's former commander-in-chief, who now serves as the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK, has said that the U.S. is destroying the world order and comments critical of the Trump administration's approach towards the war. Speaking at a conference hosted by the Chatham House think tank, Zaluzhny said the actions of the U.S. under President Trump have called into question the unity of the Western world. He added, "We see that it is not just the axis of evil and Russia trying to revise the world order, but the U.S. is finally destroying this order." Zaluzhny added that the Trump administration's diplomacy with Russia was a sign that the U.S. was taking steps towards the Kremlin, trying to meet them halfway. Zaluzhny's comments came after the U.S. paused military aid and intelligence sharing to Ukraine, which he said was a huge challenge for the entire world. In recent days, Ukrainian President Zelensky has been taking a conciliatory tone towards the Trump administration to unfreeze support, and according to Politico, the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry is distancing itself from Zaluzhny's remarks, saying it was just his personal opinion. Zaluzhny clashed with Zelensky during his time in charge of the war effort and has long been rumored to be a potential candidate if Ukraine holds presidential elections, which is interesting because the Trump administration has opened some talks, I think with the party of Petro Poroshenko, about holding elections in Ukraine, and that seems to be a way to undermine Zelensky by talking to his political opposition. But here we have Zaluzhny, maybe his strongest political opposition, and he's attacking the Trump administration, which will likely make it less likely that he ends up as the future president of Ukraine. So a poll conducted in 2024 found that Zelensky would lose to Zaluzhny if election were held at that time. According to the survey, 41% favored Zaluzhny in the first round election, while only 23% would vote for Zelensky. Zelensky has come under criticism from President Donald Trump for the lack of elections in Ukraine, as the Ukrainian leader has remained in power beyond his term, which expired in May of 2024. U.S. officials have said the Trump administration wants elections in Ukraine as a part of a potential peace deal. Ukrainian officials have justified not holding an election by pointing to Ukraine's constitution, which prohibits elections during martial law. Martial law was first declared when Russia invaded and has been extended since. However, Zelensky made it clear at one point that he would hold a vote if he won it, suggesting that it could happen if the U.S. and other Western countries paid for it. But the Biden administration did not put any pressure on Zelensky to hold elections and helped to justify the decision not to have them. And so, the Biden policy was just to keep Zelensky in power. All right, next up, this is another article I wrote for the Institute on May 6th. France considering extending nuclear deterrence to all European allies. So French President Emmanuel Macron is leading a group of European leaders who are highly concerned about President Donald Trump and that he may not continue to fund the proxy war in Ukraine and defend NATO if one of the members are attacked. So speaking during a televised address on Wednesday, Macron said that our nuclear deterrent protects us. It is comprehensive, sovereign, and French through and through. I have decided to open the strategic debate on protection through deterrence for our allies on the European continent. France is one of 3 NATO members with nuclear weapons and is the only state in the European Union to possess a strategic arsenal. The US stations its own nuclear weapons in a number of EU nations, however. So Macron said the discussions were needed due to the alleged threat posed by Russia and questioned whether the US would come to Europe's aid if there was an invasion. He said, Russia has become a threat to France and Europe for years to come. I want to believe that the United States will remain by our side, but we need to be ready if that is no longer the case. The future of Europe should not be decided in Washington or in Moscow, he added. So on Thursday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov responded sharply to Macron's remarks, calling them stupid, while warning that Russia viewed the statement as a threat. He said if he considers us a threat, calls a meeting of the chiefs of general staff of the European countries in Britain, and says that it is necessary to prepare for the use of nuclear weapons against Russia, this is, of course, a threat, Lavrov explained. President Trump has repeatedly vowed to bring the war in Ukraine to an end and to help reach a diplomatic settlement with Russia. Some NATO and European Union states have interpreted Trump's recent decision to cut off aid to Kiev as a signal that Washington would abandon Europe if it was attacked. Macron's latest comments marked the second time in recent days that he suggested extending France's nuclear umbrella to the rest of Europe. The position was denounced by French opposition figure Marine Le Pen, who argued sharing nuclear deterrence is equivalent to abolishing it. Unleashing the nuclear fire cannot be separated from national and popular legitimacy. Macron's fears of a Russian attack and abandonment by Washington have been echoed by leaders across the EU. On Monday, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen warned that we are living in the most momentous and dangerous of times, while German Chancellor-in-Waiting Friedrich Merz recently declared that Europe had a 5 minutes to midnight, and that's a warning that, if we don't act soon, then we're going to be beholden to Russia when America abandons us. So EU leaders will meet on Thursday to discuss increasing military spending and new arm transfers to Ukraine. The Rearm Europe plan calls for member states to take on additional debt and ramp up military spending by $840 billion over 4 years. Some of the spending will be devoted to weapons for Ukraine. A draft text of a statement from the European Union summit says the bloc will continue to provide support to Ukraine with regular and predictable financial support. The document exposed a rift in the EU, however, as Hungary refused to sign it. During Macron's address, he said Paris's support for Kiev may extend beyond arms shipments and that French troops could be sent to Ukraine. He explained, "Our forces will be there if necessary to guarantee peace, not before a peace agreement is signed. We will continue to meet with allies to move towards the signing of such an agreement. It is a plan for a lasting, solid, verifiable peace agreement, which we will be working with European partners and Ukraine." Foreign Minister Lavrov also had harsh words for that proposal, saying if French troops were deployed to Ukraine, it would mean direct war with Russia. He explained, "This will mean not the allegedly hybrid, but direct, official, undisguised involvement of NATO countries in the war against the Russian Federation. This cannot be allowed." All right. Moving over to the Korean Peninsula, first up here, South Korean official says nuclear weapons not off the table. So a high-ranking South Korean official said Seoul could seek nuclear weapons, with Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yu suggesting that a strategic arsenal may be needed because President Donald Trump is unpredictable. Speaking to the South Korean National Assembly last week, Cho said it was premature to talk about such a plan B, developing nuclear weapons, but that doesn't mean it's off the table, adding, given the international situations are developing in unpredictable directions, this is a principled response that we must prepare for all possible scenarios. Cho's remarks echo statements made last month. He made last month. U.S. security dependability is driving increased calls for independent nuclear deterrence capability for South Korea and other countries in East Asia, he told European leaders at the Munich Security Conference. While Washington has long opposed South Korea developing its own nuclear weapons, Seoul has the raw materials and resources to build a bomb. However, in 2016, Trump said it may be better for South Korea and Japan to develop nukes as a counter to North Korea's strategic weapons. The idea is popular in South Korea, with polls showing that 3 in 4 people support Seoul obtaining nuclear weapons. Cho said Seoul was considering the nuclear option as Trump had made world events more volatile. Given the international situations are developing in unpredictable directions, this is a principled response that we must be prepared for all scenarios. However, even before Trump's re-election, top South Korean officials had floated the idea of developing nuclear weapons because of the threat posed by North Korea. Last year, then Defense Minister Kim Yong-hong said the decision must remain on the table. Embattled South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol said in 2023, it is possible that the problem gets worse and our country will introduce tactical nuclear weapons or build them on our own. If that's the case, we can have our own nuclear weapons pretty quickly, given our scientific and technological capabilities. Additionally, since Trump's return to the White House, Washington has maintained an aggressive posture in East Asia. On Sunday, U.S. aircraft carrier stopped at a South Korean port as a show of force directed at Pyongyang. In response, Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korea's Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un, said that the United States is repeatedly committing provocative acts that ignore North Korea's security concerns and worsen the situation. Kim pointed that American warships, the USS Carl Vinson, as well as a U.S. submarine that arrived in South Korea earlier this year, are both capable of delivering nuclear strikes. She added that North Korea would continue to strengthen its nuclear program, explaining the hostile policy towards North Korea pursued by the United States today, along with its actions, provides ample justification for the indefinite strengthening of our nuclear deterrence. We will not sit back and comment on the situation. So, another really insane story coming out of North Korea is this one I wrote yesterday for the Institute. So, 29 South Koreans were injured by bombs dropped during joint war games with the U.S. U.S. and South Korean forces conducting live-fire war games over the Korean Peninsula accidentally dropped 8 500-pound bombs on a South Korean city, wounding nearly 30 people. According to the unnamed South Korean official who spoke with the press, 2 South Korean KF-16s aircraft dropped 8 Mk-82 500-pound bombs on a populated area on Thursday. The munitions landed in Pocheon, a city of 140,000, leaving 15 civilians and 14 soldiers injured. Photos of the aftermath show damaged homes and a damaged church, and then I actually have a video embedded in this article. I really recommend people go check it out and watch the video. It's absolutely crazy. The city was outside of the training grounds that were intended to target. Seoul said one of its pilots incorrectly entered coordinates and instead bombed the civilian area. The source did not provide an explanation for the second aircraft also bombing beyond the target zone. The U.S. and South Korean warplanes were conducting live-fire exercises ahead of the annual Freedom Shield drills, which are intended as a show of force eyeing North Korea. Tanks, howitzers, and attack helicopters and stealth fighter jets were also used in Thursday's exercises. The Freedom Shield War Games set to begin on Monday and will likely to continue to escalate tensions on the Korean Peninsula. Earlier this week, a U.S. aircraft carrier docked in South Korea, prompting North Korea to issue a statement vowing to further deepen its nuclear weapons program. When President Donald Trump left office in 2021, tensions with North Korea had somewhat cooled. Washington had paused major war games with South Korea, and Pyongyang limited its missile testing under a short-lived freeze-for-freeze deal. However, President Joe Biden abandoned Trump's engagement policy and ramped up the U.S. military presence in the region. The result was several rounds of escalation, including major war games and frequent missile tests between the U.S. and the two Koreas. Since returning to office, Trump has continued with the Biden policy with respect to the Korean Peninsula, deploying strategic military equipment to Seoul and conducting live-fire military drills. So I'm sure we will be talking about the Korean Peninsula on next week's show as well. Next up here, Trump says the people of Gaza will be dead if the hostages aren't returned. So this one from Dave DeCamp, March 5th at antiwar.com. President Trump on Wednesday issued a threat against the civilian population in Gaza, saying the people of Gaza would be dead if the Israeli hostages weren't immediately released. So this is a Trump post from his Truth Social account. Also, to the people of Gaza, a beautiful future awaits, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead. Make a smart decision. Release the hostages now, or there will be hell to pay later. Addressing Hamas in the statement, Trump said, "Shalom Hamas," meaning hello and goodbye. You can choose to release all of the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it's over for you. Trump's threat came after he met with Israelis who were previously held in captivity by Hamas in Gaza. It also came after Axios reported that the U.S. had held direct talks with Hamas for the first time. So Trump said, "I am sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job. Not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say. I have just met with your former hostages whose lives have been destroyed. This is the last warning for leadership. Now is the time to leave Gaza while you still had the chance." The Trump administration's recently expedited billions in new weapon shipments to Israel, a move that came right before Israel cut off entry of aid and other goods into Gaza in violation of the ceasefire deal with Hamas. With U.S. backing, Israel is trying to get Hamas to agree to new terms that would free Israeli hostages without Israel having to withdraw from Gaza or agree to a permanent truce. If Hamas doesn't agree to Israeli terms, Israel has what they're calling a hell plan that would effectively cut off electricity and water going into Gaza to prepare for the full-scale resumption of the genocidal war. Trump has repeatedly stated that he is willing to back Israel if it chooses to restart the bombing campaign. And so there was this report of the Trump administration holding direct talks with Hamas, and apparently those talks didn't go well. Withcott says Trump threat came after the U.S. didn't like what it heard from Hamas during direct talks. So Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy for the Middle East, said Thursday that President Trump's latest ultimatum against Hamas, which included a threat against the people of Gaza, came after the U.S. didn't like what it heard in direct talks with the Palestinian group. Witkoff and other U.S. officials have confirmed that the U.S. engaged directly with Hamas for the first time through Adam Bowler, President Trump's special envoy for hostage affairs. Witkoff told reporters at the White House, "Unfortunately, what we learned from is what Hamas told us they're going to be thinking about it in a certain way. That's important information for us to have." And so came the tweet from the president. In his ultimatum, Trump said Hamas would be destroyed and the people of Gaza would be dead if the hostages weren't immediately released. The threat came after Trump hosted Israelis who were previously held by Hamas in Gaza. The focus of the U.S.-Hamas talks has been on the release of the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages held in Gaza who have U.S. citizenship and a U.S. citizen who is believed to be alive, 21-year-old Eden Alexander, who grew up in New Jersey and moved to Israel after high school to join the Israeli military. Witkoff said that the U.S. was still open to dialogue with Hamas, but said it didn't work, then the alternative is not such a good alternative for Hamas. He also hinted at potential military action if they didn't free the hostages and leave Gaza. Witkoff said, "It is not clear exactly what is going to happen. Some kind of action will be taken. It could be jointly with the Israelis. It's not clear right now. They're going to have to be a part of the government there. Everyone understands that. If Witkoff said they're not going to be a part of the government there, referring to Hamas. Everyone understands that. If they understand that, they have a path to leave." When asked to elaborate on what he meant by joint Israeli action, Witkoff said he meant Israel taking action with U.S. support. He explained any action really principally comes from the Israelis, but you heard the president say yesterday he's giving the Israelis everything they need. So it's the Israelis, but with very, very strong physical and emotional support from the United States. Hamas responded to Trump's latest threats on Thursday, saying it complicates the ceasefire process. So the Hamas spokesman explained, "These threats complicate the ceasefire agreement and encourage Israel to invade its commitments. Hamas has fulfilled its obligations under Phase 1, but Israel is refusing to move to Phase 2. The U.S. administration must put pressure the occupation to engage in negotiations for the next phase as outlined in the agreement." Hamas also said the best path to free the remaining Israeli hostages is through negotiations on the second phase of the ceasefire deal. But Israel has violated the initial deal by refusing to enter talks on Phase 2 and imposed a total blockade on all goods entering Gaza to pressure Hamas to accept the new terms, which involve more hostages being freed without a full Israeli withdrawal and commitment to a permanent truce. The U.S. has backed Israel's collective punishment of civilian population in order to pressure Hamas. So next up here, we have this one. UN Food Agency says it has under 2 weeks worth of food supplies in Gaza due to the Israeli blockade. So this is the World Food Program, the WFP, has warned that it only has enough food supplies in Gaza to keep public kitchens and bakeries open for less than 2 weeks after Israel blocked the entrance of all goods into the Palestinian territory. Israel announced it was cutting off the delivery of food, fuel, and medicine and other supplies in Gaza on Sunday, with full backing from the U.S. Israel is in violation of the ceasefire deal agreed to back in January and is attempting to pressure Hamas to agree to a new deal that won't involve the complete Israeli withdrawal or a permanent ceasefire. The WFP said on top of its low food stocks, it only has enough fuel for a few more weeks. Palestinians in Gaza say they immediately feel the effects of Israel's siege on the entry of all goods as food prices are beginning to climb. Before Sunday, Israel was still blocking the entry of mobile homes and sufficient tent supplies in Gaza, which it committed to allowing into the Strip as a part of the ceasefire deal. Due to the Israeli restrictions and a cold spell, at least 6 Palestinian infants living in tents have died of hypothermia in recent weeks. While the U.S. has backed Israel's siege and collective punishment of Gaza's civilian population amid the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, has received widespread condemnation. Israel has also reportedly planning to cut water and electricity to Gaza as part of a hell plan if Hamas doesn't agree to the terms that Israel is putting on the table. Now, Israel Smotrich met with the Treasury Secretary in Washington. This is one of Israel's most fanatical politicians, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, an outspoken proponent of the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza and the Israeli annexation of the West Bank, arrived in the U.S. and met with the U.S. Treasury Secretary in Washington on Wednesday. The Biden administration reportedly had a tacit ban on Smotrich visiting Washington, although President Biden provided Israel with plenty of weapons and political support to advance the policies favored by Smotrich and other Israeli white right-wing politicians. So Smotrich posted on X, "Good morning from Washington. After 4 years which, under the Biden administration, no ministerial level meetings took place between the U.S. Treasury Department and the Israeli government, we are now entering the U.S. Treasury Department for a very important meeting." Smotrich said that he would thank the Trump administration for its unequivocal support for the state of Israel in the critical war of existence we are waging. After a meeting with the Treasury Secretary, Smoltrich released what he said was a joint statement from the two officials. The statement said they reaffirmed the strong and enduring commitment of both nations to strategic and economic partnership and agreed to strengthen dialogue mechanisms to enhance collaboration in key areas, including economic policy, technology, and financial regulations. Smoltrich is also expected to drum up support for the Israeli annexation of the Israeli-occupied West Bank during his time in Washington. On February 5th, President Trump was asked about Israeli annexation of Palestinian territory, and he said he would have an announcement on the matter in 4 weeks. And Wednesday marks exactly 4 weeks since he made those comments. Besides the Israeli finance minister, Smoltrich also holds a ministerial position that gives him the power to expand Israeli settlements in the West Bank, and he has overseen massive Israeli land grabs in the territory. Smoltrich, a settler himself, also favors the establishment of Jewish settlements in Gaza and has welcomed Trump's calls for a permanent expulsion of the Palestinians from the territory. Smoltrich recently claimed that the ethnic cleansing plan would start within weeks. He has previously said that it may be moral and justified for Israel to starve to death 2 million Palestinians living in Gaza. Absolutely horrific figure. All right, the very last story that we have on today's show. I think this is probably the most articles that I have gone through on a show in maybe a year. There's just so much going on. I'm also writing a lot for the Institute. I think I wrote 7 articles in the past 2 days. So, new Israeli army chief to present plan to restart Gaza bombing and retake territory. So the new head of the Israeli military is set to present his plan for the renewal of Israel's campaign in Gaza and operations to retake territory that the IDF left during the first phase of the ceasefire deal, Haaretz reported on Thursday. So Ezel Zamir was sworn in as the IDF's new chief of staff on Wednesday and vowed that Israel's mission against Hamas has not been completed, and other Israeli officials have been threatening to restart the genocidal war at a level not seen before. However, Israeli sources told Haaretz that they doubt the IDF will be able to draft the number of required reservists to enact Zamir's plan, which requires several troop divisions to be deployed across Gaza. The report said many officers in the reserves have made clear that they would not volunteer to return to combat in Gaza since they think it would be done for political considerations. Other sources told Haaretz that the Israeli military could restart combat in Gaza again, but the idea that it would be more intense than before is overblown, as the IDF wants to keep its forces ready for the possibility of war with Iran. The Israeli military has been stretched thin as the IDF has invaded southern Syria and continues to occupy southern Lebanon and has significantly escalated attacks in the West Bank. The current ceasefire agreement is hanging by a thread as Israel has imposed a total blockade on all goods entering Gaza, a major violation of the ceasefire and hostage exchange deal. The Israeli military has also killed over 100 Palestinians since the truce went into effect on January 19th. On Thursday, Israel carried out a drone strike in Gaza, killing at least 3 Palestinians. The Palestinian news agency Wafa reported the drone targeted a gathering of civilians east of Gaza City. For its part, the IDF claimed it targeted people planting bombs, but provided no evidence. All right, everybody, that will do it for the show today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're still listening to the show, do 2 things for me. Head on over to Libertarian Institute, make a donation, help us out in our fundraiser if you haven't done so already, and head on over to the YouTube channel for the Kyle Anzalone Show and hit the subscribe button. We are closing in on 500 subscribers, which is really awesome for just being in the first month or so of the show. And so help me out by subscribing is the first link in the show notes page. Thanks, everyone.